This is Pastor Steve Kelly. On this Wednesday, I want to welcome you to another prayer meeting as we gather online. Normally, I would be sharing with you about a 20 to 25 minute devotion on Wednesday nights, and so we have undertaken this opportunity during our time not meeting to try and give you something similar. Do you realize it has been over a month since we have met on a Wednesday night? We had church corporately in the sanctuary on March the 15th, but we have not met on a Wednesday night since March the 11th. So the weeks have gone on. It's been 5 weeks since we have done this. And life has most certainly changed, and it's looking like it'll be May until we're able to come together again. But think about it. It's been really a time of adjustment, but it's been a time of missed opportunities too. It's really been a great time to grow, but it's been a time of disappointments. I think of school being canceled now. The kids will not go back to their campuses this year, and for some they're in celebration, but for others that had some really big events, a great disappointment. I think of our high school seniors in particular. The last 2 months of the school year, you're building up to graduation, and all that has been changed. I think of our kids that were going to play softball and baseball, play those sports in the spring, those on the track team. That will be missed, especially for those who are older that are going to lose those opportunities to be a leader. I think within our church, we had 8 kids this year, I believe it was, going to the LeBasic tour, Louisiana Baptist All-State Youth Choir. That has now been canceled. They were going to be going to Chicago the first week in June, and now that's not going to happen. Many disappointments. And you know what I've come to learn in my years of life and pastoring? If you want to define what living is, it is disappointment management. Because life is always going to have its wide array of disappointments. Now, if you're not careful, as you seek to move forward in life, you focus a lot on what you missed. And I need to just accept that I'm going to miss things, but I have a lot in the middle of what I'm missing. Now, if you wanted to define even further, what is disappointment management? It's endurance. Endurance is dealing with disappointment. Endurance is getting through disappointment. And so I want to speak tonight on the whole issue of disappointment, but it's primarily enduring disappointment. And I'm going to entitle our message tonight, Getting Through This, because this is just another this in the never-ending series of this events that are going to come up in life. It's this year, and then it's going to be another this next year. I can think in my own life of 3 significant this events that just really defined who I am and how I dealt with them. I think back to when I was 27 years of age. My dad was diagnosed with lung cancer. Actually, at the time, I had just turned 26, and he died when I was 27. We were in the state of Iowa helping plant a church. I was away from him the majority of his cancer illness. Came back for a short period in the summer before he died and made it home 48 hours before he died, and missed a whole lot because we were elsewhere. I had to deal with that. I'm telling you, it was a struggle. But it didn't stop me. I preached through it. We led through it, battled with it, cried during it, cried after it, but got through it. I think of 2005 when Hurricane Katrina ravaged South Louisiana, specifically Metro New Orleans. I was born in St. Bernard Parish, just outside of New Orleans, lived in the same house all the way until I married. That was home. Everything I knew about life for those first 21 years was in a community that was totally leveled by Katrina. Dealt with it, cried over it, saw the home that would never be lived in again. I actually happened to be there the day that the bulldozers took it down, and struggled with it. It changed life, but got through it. And of course, just a little less than 2 years ago, when Elijah was born, our grandson, found out 2 days after his birth that he had a very rare heart condition. He lived a total of 76 days, tumultuous, difficult, emotional days, got through it. Let me tell you, life is about getting through it. Hear me out. You may not get over it, you get through it. Because if you don't learn how to get through it, then you will not only not get over it, it will overcome you. You see, here's the deal with endurance. Endurance is not allowing the things that you seek to overcome you. You never get over it, you get through it. And I want to look at a very famous passage of Scripture in the book of Hebrews, chapter 12. It comes right after, obviously, chapter 11, and chapter 11 is known as the Hall of Faith. It is a long listing of biblical characters who overcame through their faith. And tonight I want to give you 4 tips from the passage that are very, very clear in the text about how to get through this and whatever the next this is in your life. So I'm going to go ahead and read those 3 verses in Hebrews 12, 1 through 3, and then we're going to look at them in a bit more detail. Therefore, since we are surrounded by such a great cloud of witnesses, let us throw off everything that hinders and the sin that so easily entangles. Let us run with perseverance the race marked out for us. Let us fix our eyes on Jesus, the author and perfecter of our faith, who for the joy set before him endured the cross, scorning its shame, and sat down at the right hand of the throne of God. Consider him who endured such opposition from sinful men, so that you will not grow weary and lose heart. 4 things that I think will help you. You might even want to write these down and use these in the days to come, and look back at Hebrews 12. This would be especially beneficial for the person that is struggling with getting through this. The first thing you need to grab onto from our text is to get through this. I need good examples of those who have endured. Now, what kind of examples would that be? People that are dead that give stories of endurance, people that are alive that give stories of endurance, people that I know that are enduring. If you look at chapter 12, verse 1, it begins with the word therefore. Heard this years ago. When you see the word therefore in Scripture, you've got to ask yourself the question, what is that there for? Well, it's a linkage. It's a linkage from chapter 11 into chapter 12. Chapter 11 is this list of heroes who endured and overcame and showed faith. And so it's saying because of them, because of their faith and endurance, know this, you are surrounded by a great cloud of witnesses. It is kind of showing that all of these that went before you are watching you from beyond this life. I've heard people illustrate it like a sports stadium. Those who were on the field are now in the stands, and they've been where you are. And you can look to them to get inspiration. And so understand this, the Scriptures are not a book. It's not, the Scriptures are not a compilation of books about people who were neutral. It is a series of writings about people who were engaged for God or people who were engaged against God. You see very little spoken of in Scriptures of people who didn't do a thing, people who were standing still, those who were on fire, who were encouraged for God, or those who had a desire to attack the things of God. How do I know that? Well, you can just obviously see it. Noah, for God. Abraham, for God. Joseph, for God. We see Pharaoh against God. We see beyond that, like King Ahab against God. Jezebel against God. Potiphar, Herod. We see these that were in opposition to the things of God. But then you look at people like a Jeremiah, or you look at a Joshua, or in the New Testament, John the Baptist, or a Peter. The Bible highlights those who did something for God or against God. You don't see people that, they just sat at home and did nothing. Also, you don't see the Bible speak much of those who were overcome by evil or depression or discouragement, but you see those who overcame. So we think of the Scriptures, a great cloud of witnesses. These are people that we need to look at their examples. That's why you need to be in the Bible. during this time of so-called quarantine, so that you can read about the overcomers, the endurers, the people of faith. What about people that are living today? Well, there's a lot of people who are servants of God that give us tremendous examples of endurance. I am really very pleased with Franklin Graham and Samaritan's Purse. They're best known in our day for Operation Christmas Child and the shoe boxes that go all over the world. But right now, they're really known for setting up hospitals and relief in various cities, specifically New York, during this COVID-19 pandemic. But Franklin has risen up in his daddy's footsteps. You know, when I first heard Franklin, it would have been in 1996. It was in the Superdome. He was speaking at a Promise Keepers event. This is back when tens of thousands of men would gather in large stadiums. And I heard him speak and I thought, he is not his daddy. But you know what? He was never intended to be his daddy. His dad didn't do this type of disaster relief, but he's followed in his daddy's footsteps of presenting the gospel, but in a way that is really indicative of himself and his own personality. I go before that. His dad's been dead a couple of years now. And, I loved Billy Graham. He was such an inspiration in my life. I watched him, had the privilege of seeing him also in the Superdome a number of years ago. But I look at these examples of faithfulness, and we could find other examples. I won't go to calling names. People in our church that are examples of faithfulness, people you know. Watch them. You see, if you're not careful, you will follow the examples of people falling apart to justify yourself falling apart. Instead, you need to find examples of endurance to give you encouragement that you too will endure. You need living examples, you need dead examples, you need many examples to help you endure. To get through this, I need examples of those who have endured and who are enduring. Look at the second thing. To get through this, I need to deal with sins that discourage endurance. I've read some articles since all this has taken place about people coping. Do you know that alcohol usage is up right now? It's my understanding that drug usage is up right now. It's my understanding as well that pornography usage is up right now. Why is that? People are using these things as a means of coping. All of these things feed human desires and appetites. And so people that may have done these in moderation previously are now doing them in greater excess. They're becoming more dependent on them. And here's the problem with that. When this is over, instead of overcoming this season, these things will become a part of people's lives. Maybe they are being used currently as a distraction, but they're not a distraction. They're a destructive force in life. They're not a solution. They become something that people lean on that's not worthwhile. So I want to encourage you, if you have developed a sinful behavior or you know of someone that is doing that right now, maybe you would recommend they watch this video and say, look, I think this would help you. And so sinful behavior is something we need to shake while we have the opportunity to do so. Some people even do this, though, during the pandemic. They're saying, look, I lost my job. This didn't happen. I'm feeling sorry for myself. I deserve to do these things. I need something in my life. That's not what we're seeing in Scripture here. We're encouraged to get rid of it, not to embrace it. Look at verse 1. It says, let us throw off everything that hinders and the sin that so easily entangles. He's saying, look, you can't go forward when you're way down. If you're going to go forward in the race, you've got to get rid of the things that weigh you down. If you're heavy, you can't go fast. If you've got this stuff all entangled in your life, you are tripping instead of running. This is what concerns me about a lot of professing Christians, and there's people that I have in my own life that I think about. They cannot go to church right now. They're unable to assemble, and so they depend on that. That's become their Christian experience, is going to a building. A lot of them will not watch a video like this because it's not what they're used to. And so some people are going to disengage. Now, what that does is when you disengage from the church, you disengage from Bible reading, you disengage from spiritual fellowship, that you find a vacuum has formed in your life, and you've got to fill that vacuum with something. You're going to either fill it with God or you're going to fill it with substitutes. You might say, well, Brother Steve, what do you want me to do? I'm just not happy right now. I feel like the walls are closing in around me. I can't do what I want to do. Maybe you're a high school student. You've been disappointed because you're missing out on some special events. Maybe you're a parent who's disappointed for your kids. Perhaps you were about to retire. I mean, you were on the edge. You were just weeks or months from retirement, and you saw the stock market going up, and you thought, what a great time to do it. And then, boom, we've dropped thousands of points. And so your retirement has lost a significant amount of money. Maybe you've received a pink slip because your company's not able to function right now, and you've had to file for unemployment. Or maybe you had the dream vacation scheduled. You can't go now, and you're thinking, I'm just angry. I'm really angry about all this. And so listen, you may not start drinking alcohol or shooting up drugs or viewing pornography, but you're acquiring bitterness. That's just as dangerous. In fact, I think it's more dangerous, because to be an alcoholic, I need alcohol. To be a drug addict, I need drugs. To be into pornography, I need images. But to be bitter, I just need me. See, I can be bitter anywhere as long as it's in me. Bitterness grows in my life. You need to be cautious that you don't let sins hinder and entangle you. Because if you're not careful, this coronavirus season will be a season of grown bitterness in your life because you just think things are not fair for you. Look at the third tip you need to grab onto in all this. To get through this, I must run the race of perseverance. And I like the word run. Run means speed. Run means movement. It's about momentum. Has the coronavirus pandemic season, isolation, slowed you down? You might say, well, of course it slowed me down. I can't do what I want to do. I'm talking about spiritually. Really, it should not have slowed you down. It should have built you up because it changed your behavior. You see, I can be running spiritually while I'm sitting still. I can be running spiritually when I'm not driving my car. I can be running spiritually when I'm not at work. I can use this season to speed up rather than slow down. Because here's the deal about running. Coronavirus can infect your body, but most of us will not receive this infection. But a lot of us will find coronavirus afflicts our attitudes and slows us down. Running is about attitude. A few years ago, I was going to a doctor. Some of you might remember I had to deal with some blood clots, and the doctor said, look, blood does not clot when it's moving. You need to be more active. I thought, that's a great idea. It also will help your weight. And I thought, that's not a bad idea either. So a couple of years ago, I decided I'm going to start walking every day. And I have been very diligent, except for days where we've had significant rain or schedule would not allow. I've been about 98, 99% of walking every day, mostly in the morning. Sometimes I do it at night. But here's what I've tried to do with my walk. It's not just how far I walk. It's about how fast I walk. I want to keep a pace. So where I normally walk is roughly 2 to 2.5 miles. I can do it in 35 or 40 minutes normally. And I've even got it down to what the lap is, because it's multiple laps where I walk. And I do it in about 6 minutes. So here's what I do. When I start the lap, I have the stopwatch on my phone. I hit start, and every time I hit the lap, I hit the lap button. And I look at my phone to see if I'm on. Now, sometimes, especially the first lap, because I don't know how fast I'm going, it'll say that I'm 20, 30 seconds slower than I want to be. I think I've got to speed up lap 2. And then I go around and I've sped up lap 2, and I'll get on pace. Here's the deal you need to understand. If you do not track your spiritual pace, you will slow down. You need something to monitor that. And that's why daily Bible reading is a good thing, because I have to do it every day. Daily prayer is an important thing. I do it every day. Contacting people, ministering to people, I do it every day. Withholding myself from certain behaviors, I can monitor that every day. See, when I run the race, a race requires consistency and stability. This is a marathon. Look at verse 1 again. It says, "Let us run with perseverance the race marked out for us." So when I read that, I can't help but think of the movie from about 20 years ago, Forrest Gump. And this phrase, you already thought of it as I said, Forrest Gump. Run, Forrest, run! And Forrest loved to run. Much of the movie is about Forrest running, even though he didn't always understand why he was running. I think God from heaven would scream to us, "Run, Steve, run." But God, I'm not happy. "Run, Steve, run." But God, there's this disease. "Run, Steve, run." But church isn't meeting. "Run, Steve, run." But we had to cancel our trip at spring break. "Run, Steve, run." But God's saying, just run. Run and get through it. You see, here's what Satan would say. "Stop, Steve, stop. Slow down, Steve, slow down. Have a pity party, Steve, have a pity party." The devil wants you to slow down and social distance yourself from God. Wow. Have you become a socially distant Christian from your Father in heaven? That's the devil's goal. God would say, "Run to me, get closer to me." Devil would say, "Slow it down, give up, get angry, use outside things to distract you." Listen, to be an endurer, I need to stay on the pace I had before. Let's see the last thing. To get through this, I need to focus on Jesus. Oh, endurance has everything to do with focus. It's knowing the finish line. Every runner that runs any kind of race paces themselves according to the length of the course. Now, if I'm a sprinter and it's a 100-meter run, I'm all out the whole thing because there's no time to pace myself and slow and speed up. But if I'm a marathoner, I'm not running full speed the whole time. There are places where I run faster, places where I run slower. I'm trying to have the energy to make that final burst and get to the finish line. But here's the goal. What is my finish line? You see, if you focus on what you're missing, you're going to get discouraged. But if you focus on where you're going, you can be encouraged. Here's what you do. You run through the disappointment, targeting the goal. But I missed this and I missed this. Run through it. What is your goal? Your goal is to please Jesus. It says in verse 2, "Let us fix our eyes on Jesus." I promise you, if you do that as a believer, you will grow and you will endure and you will get through it. I think back to what I shared earlier about 3 defining times in my life. I loved my dad. If you've known anything about me, I've talked about my dad often. I have his picture right over here behind me. I loved him. He is a great example in my life. The reason he is such a great example to me is my dad was crippled at the age of 27. And my entire life, he was a crippled man who endured through his pain. He was a deacon. He was a servant of God. He taught Sunday school. He was on the finance committee. He was an usher. He visited hospitals, although he was a crippled man. And so not only was he an example to others, he was an example to his son. And so much of what I am today is because of watching his example. Now, when he got to the end of his life, and he died really at a young age, 61, of cancer, you know what I had to do? I had to run through my dad's death and see my heavenly Father as I lost my earthly father. Hurricane Katrina, I remember walking through my childhood home. It had 6 inches of sludge all the way through it. There was mold crawling up the walls. It was going to have to be gutted, and then it was contaminated by oil that had leaked out of a local oil refinery. And Mom ended up having the house bought by the refinery, as well as many, many others in the community. And she left that home and moved in with us. And here's what I had to do. I had to look through that home and see my eternal home on the other side. When Elijah breathed his last, I remember the day that I headed to the hospital. I was at a meeting in the central part of the state, and I had a lot of tears on that drive by myself, but I had to look through that, knowing it was coming, to see on the other side. I thought a lot about his funeral, knowing I was going to be leading it. I thought, people are watching how I endure. This is not about me. My endurance matters to others. I've got to run through this. I can't stop in this. Fix your eyes beyond what you are going through and focus them on where you're headed to. Hear that again. Fix your eyes beyond what you are going through and focus them on where you are headed to. Verse 3, consider him who endured such opposition from sinful men so that you will not grow weary and lose heart. Think of Jesus. Focus on Jesus. Don't worry about the oppositions and problems of our day so that you will not grow weary. That means slow down and lose heart. Think about it. That suggests two things. Growing weary is physical. Losing heart is emotional. If you lose your focus on Jesus during this season, it will slow you down on both levels. I know what you're thinking. I don't like this. I'm getting tired of this. I'm bored. I had things I wanted to do and experience. But one day, and here's the real key to right now, one day you're going to look back at how you dealt with this. And will you be able to say, I got through it, and because of the way I handled it, I'm better for it. That's what we hope comes out of this as a church and as individuals. We can say, I didn't like it, I endured through it, and I'm better for the way I handled it. And you're also going to ask yourself this question on the other side. If I had it to do again, how would I have done it differently? I hope we would say, you know what, I went through it with the right heart and the right attitude. I dealt with sin in my life. I was pure in God's sight. I grew in my faith because I got through it. Let's review our 4 things that we've brought up today, and I hope that you will use these as tips through the remainder of this season. Number 1, to get through this, I need good examples of those that have endured. So make sure there's examples from your past, from the scriptures, and in your present that you're watching. Look for good examples to help you get through this. These are good people to call on the phone if they're still in your life, people to encourage you. Don't use bad examples, use good examples. Number 2, to get through this, I need to deal with sins that discourage endurance. Get rid of the stuff that trips you up and entangles you and weighs you down. Otherwise, this is going to be a bad season in your life. You'll come out of this worse than you went into it. Number 3, to get through this, run, run, run. Do not slow down. Get closer to God. Know that Jesus is the reason for everything. Run to him. And 4thly, to get through this, I need to focus on Jesus. Here's the best way to approach this as we end our time today. He is the finish line. If he is the goal of my life, that when I cross the finish line at the end of this life, if I go into his arms, then I can have that motivation before I cross the finish line. What motivates me to get there is what I know I'm running to. Endurance is about knowing the goal. Church, I do miss you. I enjoyed being with you last Sunday in the parking lot. We will resume this Sunday with our online services. Depending on how much further we have to do this with the lack of gatherings, will determine some other modified things that we may do. Let me give you just some thoughts in the long run. I have thought about going back to the parking lot weekly, but have decided because of weather issues and of rain possibilities, of heat, some logistical things, that we would not do that weekly. That there is a benefit to having a good production that you can see on video, as compared to sitting in your car, maybe being several rows back and not being able to see anybody on the stage. So there is some benefit to seeing the whole experience. And actually, maybe you have bad reception on the radio, or who knows what could happen as we do that live. So by doing the recording, we do promote a good production that you can watch at home, that is clear and that is easy to experience. However, what we are going to do going forward, because the experience itself is worth coming together, we're looking right now, if this thing were to drag on for several more weeks, perhaps we would do another parking lot service on Mother's Day. So that's another 3 or 4 weeks out. So think about that, but we'll continue this format of Sunday recorded worship. I'll continue my 3 times a week, Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, giving you some thoughts to ponder with a longer one today on Wednesday. God bless you. I sure do miss you. Enjoyed being with you Sunday, but God has been good to our church on so many levels. I could spend another 20 minutes talking about that. But I'll tell you this, we're going to come out of this better than we went into this. Why? Because we will endure to the end. Praise God for his strength in the midst of weak times. God bless you. We'll see you soon.